Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
Welcome back to another Cellar Door Skeptics. I don't know what episode we're on, but I think it's around 40. We've been doing this for almost a year now, and, you know, it just feels good to be back home talking with Mr. Chris Hanna, my co-host, my co-host for the night tonight.
I'm not a Debbie, what is that, the Debbie food cake replacement for you.
Yeah. Well, that's good because we wouldn't want you to actually be. And so we're actually testing a little bit of new equipment tonight. We are adding some commercials in, trying to record everything in one shot, just because we want to do a live recording on our 1-year anniversary. So if there's anyone listening, make sure you send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. Let us know if you would actually listen into a live recording. And hell, tell us what the best day would be for that. Because we would love to actually do one live recording in our whole time.
Yeah, and people would actually listen to it live. That'd be the best part. Because we've done live stuff in the past with some of our old shows, and it's like, whoa, we got 2 viewers. We're getting up
no, that
there,
was
man.
you. That was you. I used to have, we had 1,000 people watching the one time.
Yeah, when we had Lawrence Krauss back in the day, the servers were freaking out. It was pretty brutal. That was awesome.
But to begin the show, I guess I'll go with a rundown real quick. So we're going to talk about astronomers.
Astronomers?
Astronomers, because I don't know how to talk. People. Yeah, we've already started drinking. So we're going to talk about astronomers and how they might have actually solved the mystery of the origins of life. Then we're going to kind of get into a little bit of an atheist rant. Not too much for those listening, but a little bit of an atheist rant. We're going to talk about 30 direct contradictions in the Bible. We'll move on from there to talk about the KKK ruling and about them not ruling the nations, but taking over a highway and the court ruling in Georgia. And we're going to close.
There's one more K in there. You only put 2.
I only put 2. Whatever. I don't have much respect for them. But we're going to close the show out talking about the Chilcot Report. And we're going to kind of tie it to the latest episode of Dan Carlin, Common Sense, about bricks, a little bit of Black Lives Matter. So you don't want to miss the end of the show. But to begin with, before we get into the show, I wanted to give a quick shout out to a friend of ours whose daughter is going through a little bit of a relapse in her cancer. Her name is Samantha Bannister. So if you're listening right now and you have any extra dollar, don't go donate to our show, though we would love that. This week, we would really love if you would go to Tiny Dancer. GoFundMe.com/Team Tiny Dancer and donate. What's happened is her relapse has put her in a children's hospital out in Detroit with some special radiation therapy. And it's going to cost an arm and a leg because they're going to have to stay at a house, and they're still trying to find arrangements so that they can all be out there as a family because they don't know how much time she has left. This is kind of like our last hope, which is good, though. On the one part, because it allows us to hope still. It's not the end. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer last year, and we feel really bad for the family. We want to do anything we can to help them out so that they can all remain together throughout all the therapy. So if you have any extra dollars, any ability to even just share this, the one link I want you to share this week is GoFundMe.com/Team Tiny Dancer. And make sure you tell them that Cellar Door Skeptics sent you.
Also, you can look, there's a hashtag, Team Tiny Dancer.
You can get that's right.
Background story, you can see all the information, the updates, to see where, what, how, and when, to really get a feel. Because, I mean, I know there's a lot of GoFundMe stuff out there. This is a real one. This is a real story, and there's a real big deal happening out here, and we love it. We love the whole family, so help them out.
And Jeremiah has been a friend of mine for the last couple of years. We've come very close with our family. Our kids play together, and Samantha has the courage of none other. She's taking this and fighting every last bit. So if you have any spare change, please go over to gofundme.com/Team Tiny Dancer. You can also go to teamtinydancer.com and check out all the updates. But let's move on into astronomy. And see, I said it this time. I said it right. I just can't say astronomers. I can say astronomy. It's kind of like Stromboli or something like that. I don't know.
We'll just go to Gizmodo. It's a great
Gizmodo.
site. They usually have some decent stuff, or they have really clickbaity garbage stuff. But this one's good. This is basically the astrobiology stuff. This is the story that I read the other day, and I was like, man, this needs to be talked about. I hadn't seen it shared very much, but I've seen little bits and pieces of these kinds of new papers and things coming out for just trying to find out where that line is, how organic life started. You know, the big argument, what we debunked the other day when we were talking about that horrible fake university on YouTube that was saying that there's multiple Big Bangs, and one of them was the start of life on Earth. I'll give it to you. We haven't figured it out yet, but guess what? We're a little closer, I think, with this paper.
Yep. And the title of the article is Astronomers Might Have Just Solved a Key Mystery About the Origins of Life. And basically what they're talking about, and we're going to get into the actual science side of this in a minute, and no, this is actually being tested right now, so it's not a proven theory. It's just a hypothesis they're now actually starting to test. And what they're talking about is massive solar storms from back when the original Earth was created billions of years ago could actually have been the start to life on this Earth as we know it. And so what they talk about is they talk about a massive solar storm that probably struck Earth not just once, not just twice, but like multiple times. And not just a few multiple times, but for years and years and years on end. And so there was a conclusion of research published in Nature Geoscience Today. And again, we'll have all links in the description. And what they're talking about is they're building on an early discovery about young sun-like stars made with NASA's Kepler Space Telescope. And basically they talk about how when the suns form, the early stars form, how they turn out to be extremely eruptive, releasing mind-boggling amounts of energy called super solar flares, or solar super flares, excuse me. And that they make our wildest space weather just look like a dribble, just like a little tiny speckle of dot. And so that's what they're talking about here. So Hannah, you found this article, so I'll let you talk a little bit about the basis of this so that we can get into a big discussion about it.
Well, what we're looking at is just another way to look at how the origin of life happened. What they're trying to do is they're trying to find new catalysts, new ways of starting this organic chemistry. Because that's the big issue, is how are we getting from just a few ionic compounds, basic chemistry, and getting to this really complex stuff, all these, the DNA and RNA, like the really, really, really important thing. So we're trying to figure that out. And what they had before, in some of the early ideas, is this thing called the Miller-Urey experiment. And this involved lightning, and they'd run gases, noble gases, the stuff that was in the atmosphere on Earth at this time. Because approximately 4 billion years ago, there was water on Earth. It was mostly frozen, it was kind of cold, and so they're trying. It's kind of a paradox as to, well, water was here that early. And because they had thought about it could be initiated from all of the organic stuff, initiated from asteroid impacts, energy added to the system, and then electricity, lightning, static electricity. And there's the Miller-Urey experiment uses lightning and gases and turns the gases into all this mud and slush. I highly recommend you check it out. It's just like, this is one of the older ideas of how it could have started. We've tested it. It's interesting, but it doesn't seem like it's a good enough explanation. So that's where this guy comes in. His name is Vladimir Arapatian.
Can you say that again? Because I'm probably going to fuck it up.
Vladimir Arapatian.
There we go.
Yeah. He's NASA's, one of NASA's workers, and he says that since the sun was equally active as these baby suns that they've been, viewing or watching or measuring with the Kepler telescope, that the sun was doing the same thing to Earth. It was super flaring out and hammering our atmosphere. And I don't know if anybody else has heard this that listens regularly, but it's been the subject of like the apocalyptic shows on in movies that, you know, a massive solar flare could take out all of our electronics and stuff like that. In 1859, I believe, there was a really, really big one, caused power outages all over the earth. Well, that kind of stuff was nothing compared to what the sun used to do us. And that is like replacing the idea of lightning. And so this ionic energy and smashing, that was what was doing the combustion and smashing all of the elements and stuff. And so that is the new idea. That's the new paper. And what they're doing is they're just now putting it into experimentation. So the people are liking the idea, but we haven't been able to test it yet. This is kind of like when Einstein came out with relativity, and then we hadn't had experimental technology to be able to actually test it until later, years and years later. Like, we just now confirmed it even more recently with gravitational waves. So, like, this is something that could have, 10 years worth of testing still to come out with.
Yep. And one of the big things here that they're talking about is when you have all this energy, what it's doing and creating on Earth inside with the waters. And they talk about, because, DNA and RNA and proteins, that's basically some of the beginning building blocks, I guess, if you want to call that, to life, and is biological molecules that are helps shaping life. But they talk about the one big thing is the nitrous gas. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Chris, but it seems like they're talking about nitrous gas seems to be kind of the key to bonding all of these together.
Well, what it was is nitrogen oxide. I don't know if you know anything about the Volkswagen crisis recently. They were cheating for greenhouse gases.
Yep.
Well, what they were cheating with was nitrogen oxide, or NOx, they call it. That is 300 times more potent than CO2 in the atmosphere as a greenhouse gas. And so what this was, all of this slamming from the sun was making nitrogen oxide. And that created a really, really hot, warm, murky, muggy Earth. And that was what was creating all of these. And it made a warm, really, really good environment for specialized bacteria called nitrogen fixers. What they do is they ate the nitrogen out of the system and they turned it into ammonia, which is an early biology lacked this ability. So this is, bacteria and things that are starting to process all the other chemicals on the Earth. And so, the organic stuff is happening there. And so that's pretty much where we were looking at, like, okay, well, how do we get the Earth warm enough to start doing this stuff? How do we get this energy added to the system? If the sun is really slow, because I'm going to take a small tangent, like the thermodynamics thing you always hear people talk about, the second law, saying we can't add complexity because it's a closed system. Well, the Earth is not a closed system. It takes in energy from the sun, and that energy that's added to the system is what violates all of the apologists' ideas that we don't add energy to the system. Therefore, life could not form because you cannot add complexity without adding energy.
So what you're saying is because these solar flares were attacking Earth at a higher rate than, let's just say, they are now, it's adding the more amount of energy and allowing the system to withstand this. So let's say they put 100 volts into the atmosphere every 30 seconds. Normally that would dissipate pretty fast, but because it's coming at such a constant pace, it's not able to dissipate, and it's like collecting itself inside of our atmosphere.
Well, the magnetosphere, what keeps the flares that we get now from the sun from hitting us, we have this big bulb of magnetized space. If you look at it, it looks like a big flower sticking out of the Earth. And that is what keeps all of the solar radiation, the solar weather from hitting us. Well, back in the day when this thing was so strong, it was just getting pounded and it was getting through. And that's what got into the Earth and made all these changes. This kind of weather is rare, but it still happened. The sun has settled down. And so that energy, what you're talking about, that's what we're talking. It's adding to the system. They called it the Carrington event, which is in 1850 something. And that was one of the worst ones that was ever recorded. And those kinds of things, like once in a generation. Well, imagine it happening like I'm gonna guess 100 times a week, 100 times a month, like lots and lots of this stuff. Maybe even faster than that. They don't give a specific on how frequent it was, but there's a couple of graphics as far as what kind of energy and stuff blasting is happening. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and that's the thing about this, and that's what's exciting is because they're able to explain where all these basically compounds came from, right? The building blocks of life. And that's always the big question. And you're like, the thermodynamics is something that they quote quite a bit. but they also don't. They say, how can something come from nothing? Well, in this aspect, that's kind of what they are doing, and they actually want to create this experiment where they're going to basically try and create something from nothing. Because what they want to do is they want to take and they want to create some sort of an experiment where they're going to put electricity inside of, like what you were saying earlier, inside of a closed circuit system, and will allow it to, try and replicate through nitrogen chemistry the way that it was 4 billion years ago. I think it's 4 billion years ago.
Yeah, that's what they said. It's a paradox that we had water on Earth 4 billion years ago, because it's kind of a surprise, because the Earth is only 4.7 billion years ago, or created 4.7 billion years ago. So, like, it's a surprisingly short period of time when life started on Earth, and that was what people were confused about. It's like, well, how did it start so quickly? And so what we're thinking now is Earth was kind of cold, it was kind of, dormant, and then the sun started into this high energy phase, and that's what started to get Earth warmed up, started to create, a habitable life in a habitable zone, they call it. It's pretty cool. They talk about it could be one of the things that explain possible life on Mars back in the day, how it wouldn't have gotten hit by as much because it's further away. Because these flares are like lasers, they're like lines that shoot out, and so that's one of the reasons why the Earth doesn't get hit very often, if ever, on the really, really big ones.
Yeah, and that's what they're trying to do is find the habitable zone, or habitable zone. I don't know how to say it. Habitable. There you go. It sounds like Hannibal Lecter zone. It's like the Hannibal Lecter zone. Not really. Actually, it's the opposite of that.
I would hang out in that place.
Cool. But it's a habitable zone is what they're looking for, because if they can define the habitable zone, then they can take it and apply it to other, planets. And the Kepler, and there's a couple, I think there's actually 3 of them now. I'm not 100% sure, but I think there's 3 of them that they've actually discovered that show different signs that could allow for an atmosphere to be born.
Yeah, like satellites in the universe, or in the solar system. I know some of the moons of Saturn and Jupiter are looking pretty interesting. I know that they found like evidence of organic compounds on Mars now. I think it's Enceladus is one of the moons. Titan, the moon Titan, I believe, has got like an ammonia lake underneath it, and I think that can potentially create animals that could survive on ammonia. We've shared it on Cellar Door Skeptics on Facebook. There's some pretty cool stuff about like this weird cave where it was sealed off from a geological event, and all of the creatures inside started to thrive on sulfur, some horribly poisonous things. But through evolution, through the natural selection processes, the animals that were in that environment were able to survive. So they're thinking that it's possible some of these warm internal moon structures that have ammonia could create an ammonia-based life form. So this kind of stuff is just kind of a way for explaining the Earth dynamics and just how life can start from basic pure chemistry and elements. And this is just another example of how we're getting closer and closer. Once we get some tests and get some more information in, then we might have something. Because the end of it irks me a little bit. He says, this is the author of it. He says, ultimately, this will inform us whether the energy from a star is available in a way that can create the chemistry to create biomolecules. Without that, it would be a miracle to have life. He had to go there.
They did. They do, because they got to sell. I don't know. They got to sell views. I guess they got to sell views. Maybe. But the NASA website, if you actually look at the NASA solar storms, may have been the key to life on Earth. NASA writes a whole blog about this, and this one is a little bit more in depth. But what it does is it says at the very end of it, and just as we're about to close out this segment, what they do is they talk about this. We want to gather all of this information, how close a planet is to a star, how energetic the star is, and how strong the planet's magnetosphere is, in order to help search for habitable planets around the stars. So with that, we're going to close, and we're going to go on to making fun a little bit more about the Bible.
Yeah, we won't go through all 30.
We won't do all 30. With more Cellar Door Skeptics. So we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. We'll be right back, everyone.
Hello, I'm Miss B. Haven.
I'm Demanda Wright.
And we're promoting secular feminism.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. What's something I could do with a very sexy lady friend of mine that people would find provocative, interesting, and entertaining enough to tune in week after week? Oh, I know. A podcast. If you'd like to hear me and Kate be provocative and thought-provoking week after week, join us on the Unbuckling the Bible Belt podcast. We'd love for you to be part of our audiological three-way.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics Podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
I think Hannah, I think that's our clue that we got to come back in from that commercial break. It's weird, isn't it? We're actually trying to create a live show, even though we're just pre-recording this.
We're just like sitting here looking at each other like, is it time? Is it time now? Do we start now?
Where's my timer? Where'd that stupid little timer go? I lost my timer. But anyway, welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around with us again for another amazing segment. And yes, make sure you are counting the amount of times I say amazing because at some point there is a drinking game.
At some point, somebody
will create it.
Is going to give us a total number count of that, and we're going to have to do something.
So if you want to, you could tweet at us at Cellar Door Skep and tell us how many times I said amazing, how many times Hannah said amazing, and I don't know, we'll figure out, because we have an exciting announcement to make. We are looking to partner with a new, and you don't even know about this, Hannah, because I made a decision without you, but we are looking to partner with a new clothing line that we'll be able to release a little bit of information and do a quick interview that's going to give us some discounts on t-shirts. T-shirts, yes. So you'll be able to see our lovely faces in front of a glass of whiskey or a shot of Jaeger along with our logo. But enough about that. We're going to have an interview with that guy, I don't know, in the upcoming next couple of months. We'll be able to have him on and talk a little bit more about our partnership with them.
Maybe I'll have to get my wife to do a graphic design thing where it doesn't look like a couple of hacks just mop something together on some crappy graphics program, which is pretty much how I roll with all of our graphics. She could probably make something that looks a whole lot better. Maybe make a logo and maybe cartoon your face or something.
Maybe. That would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But anyway, so as we actually go back to what we were talking about, it's back to the actual episode at hand. We wanted to talk about a unique little website. Okay, it's not unique. There's hundreds of contradictions. But Hannah found this website called 30 Pairs of Bible Verses That Contradict One Another. And while I'll probably be able to provide a little bit of apologetics behind this, and I'll probably do that just because I'm a contrarian at heart, we thought it would be a good discussion anyway. And it's a little lighthearted. It's going to kind of ease the episode up, maybe help you decide you want to go donate to TeamTinyDancer.com and help Samantha Bannister out. But we thought we'd do this because we know she would approve of this. And so what the whole premise behind this is when you leave Christianity, what's the one thing a lot of people say is the Bible contradicts itself. And you're going to get a lot of apologists going, no, they don't. They don't do that. There's nothing that happens to that. What are you talking about, Chris? Why would you even say that?
Or they acknowledge it. Yeah, there's contradictions, but you don't know the context.
Exactly. And so in here there is some, and I'm going to give you some context, a little bit of what an apologist will say, only because I can do that. You know, I mean, I had training a little bit in it. Probably not as much as some of the other people that we're going to have on at some point, but we do have a little bit of training in it.
Well, you got the crash course at 6 years old in the Kmart parking lot, man.
It is. So they do. So they list 30 of them. So, Hannah, why don't you tell us which number is your favorite, and I'll scroll to it on the screen.
Well, the first one I want to go to is the 30th one, man. So scroll on down, because this one's brutal. I always hear, the pacifist nature of the Bible. And so this is, rejoice not when thine enemy falleth, and let not thine heart be glad when he stumbleth. And then that's Proverbs 24:17. But in the Psalms 58:1, it says, the righteous shall rejoice when he seeth the vengeance. He shall wash his feet in the blood of the wicked. That sounds kind of contradictory, man.
It is. But what if there's a such thing as righteous vengeance? Do you think there is a such thing as righteous vengeance, Hannah?
Oh, I don't know. That's one of the things I've been battling a lot with. It's like an eye for an eye. We've tried this in society and human culture for years and years and years, and I'm going to say it's failed pretty much across the board. So, I don't know. Righteous vengeance can be interpreted in a variety of ways, and I would like to say that it would probably be better to use any kind of de-escalation or de-escalation. I don't know what word that would be for just. I mean, if someone wrongs you, your outright response is not immediately to do exactly the same thing they did to you, and obviously, like this one here would be like just collapsing and murdering and washing your feet in the blood of the enemy or whatever. Seems it basically the reason that this one comes to me is because I always hear people saying it's like, oh, the Bible it's about love and peace and happiness. Well, this I think it's Psalm 137 is the same way. It's like happy is the one who dashes the infant against the rocks. Like these things show up all the time.
I have that on a shirt, actually.
Yeah.
I do. I should find that shirt. I haven't worn that shirt in a while.
Yeah, so I guess what would the apologetics angle for this is like, okay, you're explaining a way that your enemy deserved to perish, maybe?
Yeah. Well, it depends, because I don't know how much apologetics you can get into outside of the fact that you're going to have to basically say that it's righteous justice. So if you look up that Psalms and you look up that first chapter, basically they talk about this. Lord, tear out the fangs of those lions. Let them vanish like the water that flows away. When they draw the bow, let their arrows fall short. May they be like a slug that melts away as it moves along like a stillborn child that never sees the sun.
Holy shit. That's like a metal song, man.
It is.
That's
this
brutal.
is a metal song. It says we should do that. That's a side tangent. We got to stop side tangent.
Is this
here.
a Bible verse or a metal song? Go.
That actually sounds like a good segment.
Yeah.
You better take note of this. It's 27 minutes
now.
All right. Anyway, so they say the righteous will be glad when they are avenged, when they dip their feet in the blood of the wicked. And so the only apologetics I personally can think of for this is the fact that they are talking about how if the evildoers are being cast out by God, the only way they can be saved is through God. And they can't be saved without actual violence, obviously. I mean, there's no way that you could be saved without some sort of a violence in there.
That's the thing. Like, you could probably convince someone a little bit without killing them.
You could.
Yeah.
And so if we go and look up Proverbs 24, it says, do not envy the wicked, do not desire their company, for their hearts plot violence, and their lips talk about making trouble. Wisdom is a house built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. So, but here it gets into the 24th saying. It says, whoever plots evil will be known as a schemer, and the schemers of folly are sin, and people detest a mocker. And so what they're basically saying, if we were to try and match these up, is that violence is justified through righteousness if and only if they're sinful.
So we're looking at an objective morality given by the Lord.
Yes.
Yeah. So as long as it's against the morality decreed in the Bible, then it's okay to wash your feet in their blood.
And that's because God will ordain it. So that saying is, for the evildoer has no future hope, and the lamp of the wicked will be snuffed out. Well, if God isn't going to come down and snuff them out, he's got to use other tools. So what does the Bible talk about? What does the Bible do? They're instrumental. The Bible is very instrumental in employing some sort of an individual to do that for God. Very rarely does he actually take his finger and touch the earth. I know Monty Python makes you think that, but in reality, that's not what's happening. He's using other people to do his bidding, if you want to call it that. And that's me being crude, apologists that are listening to this, if there is any. But that's the big thing here, is that that's justified only because of that.
Well, I mean, you talk about that one, it's like God coming down, being part of the system. Let's go to number 10 on the list here. It says that no man hath seen God at any time, John 1:18. And then in Genesis 32:30 it says, "For I have seen God face to face." So, but this is Old Testament versus New Testament here. I'm gonna assume that they forgot. Maybe
they forgot. So the context behind Genesis is basically talking about Jacob. I believe it's Jacob. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm almost positive that's when Jacob prepares to meet Esau. And do you know who Jacob and Esau are, Chris? I know you're a little farther away from the
Jacob.
Bible.
I know Jacob. I don't know Esau or Esau or Esau.
It's his brother, basically.
Got it.
And so I'll be honest. This one is new to me. I've never actually heard this. No man hath seen the face of God, for I have seen the face of God. The only thing I can think about is they're using hyperbole here. Is so when Jacob and Esau are saying this, they're saying they see the face of God, but they're not really saying they see it. They're basically talking about an angel or about God's goodwill, good doing, and that's why they've seen it. But in reality, they haven't seen his actual face, because it does say, and I'll be honest, in the Old Testament, if you go through it, and we'd have to look up these verses because I'm not 100% versed, and I should have done a little more research, but there is some verses that basically say, if you saw the face of God, you would die. It's not even a question. And they talk about this because they talk about when they build the temple, why they have to build all those veils. So I don't know if you're how much into the temple you had, but I had a whole month where our church actually went through on Sunday night services, and they talk about how the way the temple is built and what each part of the temple is symbolism. And they basically have a room that only a priest who is 100% holy with God can even enter. No one else can enter this. If they do, they'll be immediately struck it. And if you think about, what's that movie that everybody likes with Harrison Ford in it? Come on. Indiana Jones.
Oh.
Indiana Jones, and when he has, the Ark of the Covenant, they talk about this, right?
Oh, yeah.
In the Ark of the Covenant, there's a book in the Bible where basically somebody drops the Ark as they're moving it, right? Because they got to carry this damn thing. It's like made out of gold
and who
with
to carry it,
on
but
top.
the Nazis.
Yeah, well, in that movie they do. But in the actual Bible, they talk about this, and they talk about how it's seen, right? And that somebody drops it, and the lid slides open a little bit, and they die. These people fucking die. Sorry, I'm trying not to swear as much, but they die. And that's the thing, is you can't see the face of God. You can't do it. So the only logical explanation for this Genesis verse is that it's some sort of hyperbole that's talking about how they've seen the face of God in the actions or in whatever else is happening at the time.
So that's that symbolism or that interpretation thing that
because
Ken Ham isn't so good at.
He's not. And so if you look at the verses before and after it, they talk about how Jacob wrestles God. So this is the big Jacob and Esau story that's even in the children's books. I mean, I read this growing up as a kid all the time. And basically Jacob has to wrestle this man until daybreak. That's what he's doing. Well, that man they allude to is God. They allude to it. But because basically he's not really God, he's not like really agent? God. He's an incarnation, kind of like Jesus Christ is. He's not actually physically God. That's how he survives. That's how they get around the whole thing.
Well, the only thing I can say is that I can understand that, and that's kind of what I figured it would be, is like you can't look at it. It's a symbolic face of God, like the face of America or something, people would be able to quickly, easily add some kind of symbolic virtue. But there's the people that are biblical literalists versus the people that are, interpretative or contextual or apologists that are trying to explain all this stuff. So there's the literal interpretation, which most people don't really adhere to, except for a few. And then there's the actual specific words that we always love to hear, faith. So on the fifth one, it says, "For by grace are ye saved through faith, not of works," as in Ephesians 2:8 and 9. And then it says, "You see then how that by works a man is justified, and not by faith only," in James 2:24. So we're looking at faith is the way you're saved, not of any work you're done. And then we're also saying that the work of man is justified and not by faith only. So which is it?
Well, and that's actually a good point. And I'll be honest, this comes up quite a bit when we're talking about the different types of Christianity. Different types of Christianity lean towards different, I guess you want to call, aspects of it. And so you cannot, in true retrospect, as a Christian, you cannot be saved at all without asking Jesus Christ into your heart, period. And you can only do that through faith, not through good works. So you and I can do good things all we want, but if we don't actually have faith that there is a Jesus Christ and we need him to help us do these good works, then there's no way at all that we're going to be able to get to heaven. And so let's take that Bible verse, James 2:24. Open your Bibles and flip to it.
I didn't bring my Skeptics Annotated Bible. Damn it. I highly recommend every get one of those too. If you're not a former believer, if you weren't brought up in it, that's at least the website, because there's also the Quran, but the best website ever.
Yeah. And so what they talk about is it starts at verse 13, and it's called Faith and Deeds, is like the headline for it, right? And they talk about, can such faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and food. If one says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if not accompanied by action, is dead. Someone could say, you have faith. I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by deeds. You believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that and shudder. So what this is, I'll be honest, I don't like this one because I don't think this is a contradiction. I think you're now, this is being too picky, right? And this is not understanding, this is not even hermeneutics. In my opinion, this is actually understanding how theology works. And if Mosman was on the show, and I wish he would listen to our show so he critique us every once in a while, because I like Mosman. But he would sit here and tell you, Chris, they're not even using good theology. They're literally cherry picking this. And I'm going to be honest, I don't like this cherry pick for the one pure fact that they're just taking a small portion of it. So in James, it doesn't say you can be saved just by faith. It's saying you have to have both. You will do good deeds if you truly have faith. And vice versa. If you have good deeds, you're probably going to have faith that you need to do it. And so think about the trope argument that you get. You know, when we want to go volunteer at a homeless shelter, they ask us what ministry with what church, what we want to do, and we're like, we're fucking atheists, you know?
It's like the old Hitchens adage. It says that, show me any deed that cannot be done by a non-believer that is just and good and truly humanistic, that can be done by a believer that cannot be done by a non-believer. It's the same situation. So like this one here, I guess you could bring it down to that line that your faith and your deeds, well, your deeds is the more important one here because it seems to be the one that's doing most of the work. And the other one saying your deed are the most important. For the other one's just like faith is not the one that you can't be justified by your deeds or not by faith only. So I don't know. I guess that one definitely a little bit more clarification on that one.
Yeah, see, and then when I disagree,
did you have any favorites in this list that you liked more, or did you want to keep going on that one?
No, I do, and I don't want to go through the whole list because I think that seems silly to go through the whole list,
more.
But. The one big one that I like is number 8, and it says, "For I am the Lord, I change not." And then that's Malachi 3:6. Then Exodus 32:14 says, "And the Lord repented of the evil which he thought to do unto his people." And see, that one doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're going to look that one up real quick. We're going to say, okay, hold on.
Well, yeah, he doesn't change, though. Like, any decree made is specific and unalterable, which is like the 10 Commandments that we have some weird fishiness on a few of those. So
yeah, because they have 2 versions of the 10 Commandments.
Yeah.
So the Lord relented and did not bring on his people the disaster that he had threatened. That's the actual wording for the verse. And so basically what they're claiming is that God says, "I'm the Lord, I make a decision, I don't change." This one's saying the Lord repents of evil, he changes his mind. And I actually think this is a big contingent, personally, and that's why I picked this one, because for me, this actually has a big contingent. And when you look at the hermeneutics behind this, they're the only hermeneutics you can use, in my opinion. And if you're a Christian listening to this, send us an email at cellardoorskeptics@gmail.com. We'll have you on the show to talk about these specific verses. But the big thing I see here is that you can look at it as whatever God decides is righteous. No matter what happens, it is righteous. Everything God does is righteous.
Contradict himself?
What's that?
Including like change his mind?
Including changing his mind, because in the end, no matter what he does is right. And that's the big problem I have, especially in the Old Testament. Because he does change his mind all the time. He does do all these things different. He goes from one thing to another, back and forth and back and forth. But for me, when I look at this and I try and understand, well, hold on a second. This makes no sense to me, right? Why would God want to change his mind? Well, it's because he has to. He has to, you know? Because if he didn't, he'd be wiping people out left and right. Like, there wouldn't be Israelites anymore. He'd be like, hold on, I got to wipe all of you out. Because what happens, and you see this when Jesus Christ comes back, is Jesus Christ is appointed as the head of the church, right? He's the ultimate figure. And then it goes down to the man and then the woman, which I disagree with, for the record. But that's what the Bible says, not me. And when you look at it and you look at that aspect, right, that means anything that happens, the man has to report back to God on. So if his wife does something bad, it's to a point partially his fault, kind of like a manager. The manager always takes the brunt for the employees. Well, that's how the Bible sets us up. Well, before Jesus came, there was no way to control that. So God had to trust certain people. He had to do these certain things. So if Moses went up and did these things and the Israelites rebelled, God would have to wipe them all out. And then he would have to wipe out his prophet, even though his prophet didn't do anything wrong. And in the Old Testament, he doesn't do that. Because when you go to the New Testament, it's all salvation and forgiveness through Jesus Christ. And so they can forgive all these past sins, which is why you see 20 times more murder in the Old Testament than you do in the New Testament.
Oh, that makes sense a little bit. I mean, I've always had a difficult time, basically, understanding some of the justifications and stuff like he goes through for switching back and forth, and then deciding to kill everyone through, global floods and stuff like that. It's just a wishy-washiness that when you hear, like, these are my decrees, these are concrete and unchangeable, I am infallible and all-knowing. How did he get it wrong the first time? Why did he need to change his mind? He should have been right the first time. So I guess from a layman's perspective, I see your points, and I mean, the best I can do is just kind of try to stick with people that are a little bit more learned. Which one of the reasons why I wanted to bring this up, because this is a decent thing with all these contradictions. These are all new to me, and one of the other ones that I thought was pretty interesting is I think it was number 24. It said, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword." These things and then that was in Matthew 10:34, and this is the verse that we usually hear a lot of times. But then also in John 16:33, "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me ye might have peace." So through me you're going to have peace, but I also come to bring a sword. And I've heard the apologetics on this, that this sword is there to cut the old covenant to make the new covenant. And I'm going to guess that's probably where you're going to go with the interpretive angle on that.
Yeah, and actually I even disagree with this one a little bit in terms, I agree that this is a contradiction and a big one in my opinion, because it's all in the New Testament. We're not comparing Old and New Testament together. And you're right, a lot of people do say, yes, I came to bring peace, not a sword. I came to bring peace on earth. But these things I've spoken to you that you might have peace, because how else can we have it without getting rid of the old? And it kind of goes back to that old, part. How can you make something survive? How can a virus survive if you're eradicating the virus, right? So if you're eradicating the Christians, you can't make it go on. Look at Paul, right? Paul was eradicating Christians left and right, and what did God do? He converted him for a reason. He converted him to stop eradicating the virus in bullshit history, right? I guess I shouldn't say that. In history. And if you look at this, and the one thing that they talk about here that it's not actually in here, is they talk about the family. Jesus doesn't want to divide the family, but yet he's here with a sword. And basically, Jesus tells you, and there's another contradiction here, that it tells you in here, we're going to get rid of you. We're going to eliminate you if you are a blasphemer. And we don't have time to cover, like I said, all of them. We only have to cover a few of them. But that's the thing here, right? There is contradictions. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening to this, you should look these up. Take this. Do your research. And if you have relatives that are, in this talking about it, right? And they're talking about what's happening, you have to understand that these people see this as their life, as their blood, as their religion, and that these have to be justified. We have to justify this. If we don't start justifying some of these contradictions, this virus is just going to continue and continue and continue without any further justification. But on that note, I won't hold anybody any longer to this segment. If you want, you can find the links in the description, go research them, and when we come back after this quick commercial break...
I'm from the Atheist Nomads podcast. Kick back a while and listen to my friends on the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
Hey, what's up? I'm Steve Hayes.
And I'm Dave Curry.
And we're from Prophetcast.
And you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics
on the Fox News Network.
They're not affiliated with Fox.
Everyone's a Fox affiliate.
Now, back to the show.
The KK wins Adopt a Highway ruling in the Georgia High Court. Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. I did it again. What did I do again?
I'm going to bust up your intros. The KKK wins the Adopt a Highway.
Oh, fuck off with your goddamn bullshit. And see, I was doing so good. I only had 3 swear words this whole episode until just now. Now we actually have to put an explicit tag on here.
Because of 3? That's the ticker? That's the number?
3. You can swear up to 3 times, I think, before you have to, put an explicit tag on.
Let's just stop now then.
I already swore 3 times this one segment, so we've already screwed it up. So I will continue to try to swear. I want this to be as friendly for family as I can.
Well, we're going to be trying to organic and stuff too. We're doing everything live, so to speak, on a couple of these runs here. We're going to be doing everything, just blasting through to prep for that 1 year. The anniversary that we mentioned earlier, possibly do a live show, maybe have some people on and goof off, and that way you can see all of our horrible mistakes that we make in real time. But this one's cool. I saw this story on, and I was like, man, you know what? I hate these people. I hate everything they stand for, but I kind of support the fact that they want to adopt a highway, and that makes me feel weird.
It makes you feel weird?
Yeah.
What kind of weird? Tingly weird?
Why would supporting the free speech rights of a group known to hate just about anything but white Christians, that makes me feel funky because I don't like that. But that's one of the parts of the free speech and Constitution and basic human rights that I do like. And so when it comes to supporting something that makes you uncomfortable, that's part of the deal. It's one of the things a lot of people that want to ban gay rights, and those are things that make them uncomfortable, things they don't like. But you know what? Sometimes being equal and giving everyone their equal chance involves being uncomfortable a little bit. You're not free from being offended it's basically a right to be offended. You're allowed to say that offends me, and then I disagree with you. But to stop someone, to shut someone down completely, is where this issue is. Like, can a group like this sponsor a highway? I mean, what do you think? Is this something that I'm going a little too weird about, or is this CNN article on point?
It kind of, I don't know. I'll be honest. Let's flesh our thoughts and ideas out here, because I think it's deserving of fleshing out. So what happened is, this was back in 2012. The Georgia Department of Transportation decided to rule against the Klan in the area from adopting a highway. An Adopt a Highway program, for those who don't know, is basically where you get a highway and you got to go clean it up. So, they obviously are trying to do good, but at the same time, they just want to put their name out. And we could argue the reasons why. Do they want to do it because they want to help the environment and they're just bigoted assholes that want to help the environment? Are they doing it because they see this as, a way to promote their name and is hoping to create more membership? Or are they just doing it because they want to be bigoted assholes and they want to be like, hey, look at us, we could have our free speech, which kind of devalues anything they believe in my opinion, which I don't think they believe in much, but it kind of devalues a lot of that. So what happened is basically the Georgia Department of Transportation is like, no, not going to happen. There's reasons for it. And they say there's two main reasons that they aren't allowed to adopt that main stretch. They said they were denied the application first because they thought it was unsafe to adopt that road because it's a controlled access highway with a speed limit of 65 miles an hour.
Which is slow.
It's slow, yeah. And the second reason is the impact of erecting a sign naming an organization which has long-rooted history in civil disturbance would cause a significant public concern. For me, that's the bigger one. The first one I don't care about, and I don't want to have a conversation about. I don't know the laws. I don't know what is safe and unsafe for 65. I know in Michigan, I've been on the side of a highway that has 70-mile-an-hour speeds. No questions asked. Because I stepped on a snake, somebody told me, I freaked out, jumped in traffic, and almost got killed. So I remember very well.
I know in parts of Texas it's 80, 85, or Arizona. Like when you get out to the really, really, really rural areas, like the speed limits are really high. Like 65 is pretty slow. When they raised it from the national requirement at 55 and let states just kind of decided what they wanted their speed limits to be. I remember when they took it from 55 to 70, everybody was just relieved. They're like, finally, we can drive a normal speed and not worry. Like I think it's just a surprise that they're saying that speed makes it dangerous. I think that they're really leaning on the second one. They think it would be a disturbance. They think people would stop, take pictures, damage the sign. They would argue, yell, protest. They don't want to deal with all of the bull that's going to come from that. All the extra paperwork and headache. So they just probably want to be like, we don't want it. We don't want the hassle, the mess, and that's one of the reasons why they just said no. Because obviously it turned into a story that made it onto major news channel.
Yeah, and so we would have to look up what is hate speech, right?
Yep.
Let's look that up a minute. If you look at hate speech, it's outside the law. Is a speech that attacks a person or group on the basis of attributes such as gender, ethnic origin, religion, race, disability, or sexual orientation. So if they have hate speech laws, which we can get into whether we feel they violate freedom of speech or not, and we could talk about that, because I do think that's a valid conversation to have. But they say the laws, sometimes in some of these countries, hate speech is any speech or gesture or writing that display which is forbidden because it incites violence or prejudicial action against or protected by certain types of groups, and because it disparages or intimidates protected individuals. So here's where I'm going to differ a little bit, and I'm going to say that I don't think hate speech should be something where it's in writing or displayed. Like, I think people should have the right to say what they want. But when they try to use that to actually incite violence, that's when I start having a problem with it. And for me, the biggest problem here is that even if it's going to create a potential hazard, I don't know if I disagree with them having a sign up that says the KKK sponsors this group. Now, if it said the KKK hates all black people and black people should be murdered, I don't think they should get that sign on the side of the road. Even if that's the name of their organization, I think that's wrong. I guess they could shorten it, and then I wouldn't have a problem with it. But they don't. It's just the KKK, and I don't. And I said it right that time. Thank you. But I don't really have that problem, because if let's look at it from an atheist perspective for a second. And we don't want to relate everything to atheism. And yes, the KKK do a lot really harmful things. And I don't want to minimize the impact that they've had on society, because they're a horrible organization.
Including bringing back the rebel flag to prominence. That's a big one that's been going on, because they're going to be raising that bad boy over to South Carolina real soon here again.
But if we look at it from an atheist perspective, what if there was an atheist group? Let's say Georgia decided that all atheists are horrible people, and atheists create controversy because 80% of the culture here is Christian. So we don't want a sign that says Atheists of Georgia on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Because people could deface it. Well, I find that wrong.
Yeah, they think that if it says atheists, and there are groups that do this. There are free thought groups that sponsor highways, and they get defaced regularly. They put up a billboard, it gets defaced in hours. So, I mean, I can agree with you 100% that, it could cause a problem both ways, that any, secular group that puts something up is going to get attacked as well. The issue is, like, back to the hate speech thing with the KKK, is if the group itself, promotes hate speech in other media, does that disqualify that group from having, free speech in all other media? So if it's just the name of the group sponsoring a highway, and people are like, whatever, we don't really care, they picked up the garbage. But, like, if they have like you said, if they have a sign promoting their specific thoughts, or if they're allowed to put signs along the highway, then yeah, no way in hell, because it's going to be terrible no matter what they do. It's a weird, tough place, and that's the reason why the courts have been having trouble with this decision. And in the end, a lot of this stuff turned into a jurisdictional issue. It's one of the arguments that they had, is like the appeal was formed, or was put in incorrectly, and so at the higher court, the KKK won because the appeal was put in incorrectly, and it's going back down to the lower courts, and so they don't know exactly what's going to happen, because there isn't a final ruling yet. It's been sent back, I guess, to the local, and so that obviously we'll see what happens here. But the question is just, the more general one. If this group is, a hate group, but they're not specifically saying their hate speech, do they just get disbarred from any kind of public media or any kind of advertising at all? Or is it just their specific hate speech? And I don't really know where to go with that. That's the reason why I was kind of like, man, it just seems like this is a touch on because the ACLU are the people who filed the lawsuit for the KKK in this situation, saying that their freedom of speech was violated. So the ACLU is usually known for being a supporter of human rights and all that kind of stuff, it's an interesting thing, but it's kind of good to see that they're still supporting, even groups that they probably completely and totally disagree with. But if their basic human rights have been violated, including the right to free speech, they're supporting that, even if they disagree with it, which is the way the free speech rule is supposed to be. I just don't know, really. Personally, I don't know the exact solution, but I kind of fall on the line as if it's just the KKK on the highway, I would kind of be like, yeah, you know what, you guys clean up the highway, I'm okay with that. And that's pretty much the best I've been able to come to.
And for me, it comes down to, are they going to wear their hoods on the highway while they do this, right? I guess if they're going to be walking
People will
around...
be turning off the highway to hit that stuff. Be like, the road cone points!
And maybe, I wouldn't put it past them. And so when we look at, like free speech laws and hate speech laws in the United States, and again, if you're outside of the country, and yes, we have some European listeners, so if you are outside of the country, that doesn't always mean our laws apply to yours, so make sure you double check. And we would love to hear what other countries', views or things are, because it's different than our own. But the big thing is, and they talk about this with hate speech, is actions speak louder than words. And they always look at the other thing too. Is somebody in an authoritative position limiting free speech? So for instance, the government here is actually limiting free speech. And they are the ones in power. Whereas if it was the KKK going after the government saying, hold on, we don't want this group's on the side of the road because of this, and that, that's different, right? There's a whole different avenue. When you have a position of power and you're able to exercise that power to silence people. That's where free speech laws come into play here. That's where we have to look at this and go, hold on a second. Hold on. Maybe, just maybe, it's more beneficial to actually allow them to say what they're going to say.
Well, that's the whole point of a lot of our checks and balances, a lot of our constitutional rights. I mean, Jefferson said, okay, sure, you guys can write the Constitution as long as I get the first 10 amendments. I mean, because he put the Declaration of Independence together, and he was pissed when they didn't give him, a hand in writing the Constitution. And so they gave him the Bill of Rights, basically, the first 10 amendments. And that, straight up, that First Amendment really, really hit hard to protect the minority voice. Because once the majority comes in, like, that's the history of humanity. The majority comes in and it squashes, crushes, and destroys the minority. We're seeing this happen all over the world still today. It almost seems like it's a human competitive nature, an innate function that we have when it comes to our societies and competitiveness. And so, like, this would be something that allows us to voice dissent. And I would feel the same way if the court said, listen, you guys are going to cause too much trouble because we can't have the Grand Rapids Free Thought Committee sponsoring a road on 131 because people would stop and deface it, and people would stop and take pictures, and people would, or whatever. So, like, I kind of understand the perspective, and I would hope that people would allow other people to be offended. You know what I mean? Like, that's the big thing. It's like, I'm allowed to be offended, and I'm allowed to offend you, but you're not allowed to censor me and shut me down, just like I'm not allowed to completely censor you and shut you down. Then we get into the hate speech, which is a little bit further on. And so I would think that just sponsoring highways and stuff wouldn't qualify for that. And so, like, that particular end, you're not in hate speech, even though you may be a hateful group.
Yeah, and see, that's the big thing here. That's a really big thing here. Is they're just a group that wants a sign. And yes, I hate the group. I wish they would disappear. Yeah. But I don't think this is the way we get them to disappear. This almost feels Trumpish, like if we were in a Trump authoritarian environment. Yeah,
you can't put it in a closet to make it go away. You can't lock it down, because if anything, you're going to give it more strength.
Exactly.
When you try to slam it and smother it.
Yes, and that's the biggest problem I have here, is that I don't agree with them for doing it. Now, if they came back with a strongly worded letter that said, okay, please don't wear your hoods, don't create a distraction, please don't turn around and, put signs up on the side of the road about how much you don't like something. I don't really want to get into half of what they don't like. But the big thing here is when we look at the dissent and we look at the thing, it says the department contends that even if its denial of the KKK's application was an administrative decision, the judgment of the Superior Court from the Department of Appeals, it was not a decision. And after reviewing the denial of the application, it says, to this end, the department points out that the judgment from which its appeals was not entered in the proceedings under the Administrative Procedure Act or any other statute authorizing direct judicial review of its denial of their application.
I think that's the specific argument they had against, it wasn't filed properly, so they're sending it back from the Superior Court to the local court so the local people can make the decision.
Yep. And I think let's look at what their application is, and you know what? Sometimes if they don't cross their I's and don't dot their T's, they don't get, an application made. But I don't know. I don't know how much time we really want to spend on this. I don't like the KKK in any way, shape, or form. I don't want them to do this in any way, shape, or form. But I don't want to single them out at all, because I don't think that's correct.
Yep. Yeah, it's in the end, really, I don't want to destroy, alternative thoughts and differential beliefs by smothering and censorship and destruction. I think the only way to do it is to put them out there and ridicule them. That is the dumbest thing I can think of. Is like a KKK trying to market through a highway sign. You guys are going to get nothing. I've heard comedians to talk about there's a KKK guys. You got me doing the 2Ks now. That they stand at the intersections of roads with the little buckets trying to do the same thing that firefighters do or whatever, and nobody gives them anything because they know society knows, and they basically dismiss them as, you're not important and you're not really a viable source of any real political power or anything anymore. And so it's just, you can exist, whatever. It's just like the really crazy militia guys and some of that stuff in the background. This one here is just let them do their thing, and they'll probably disappear because nobody's going to pay attention to it. They're just going to be like, whatever. Those are the hateful guys that we don't like. At least what I would hope society would do, and I would think that the majority of people would as well.
Yeah. And so, the big thing here, right, the big thing we got to look at is that in reality, the ACLU did stick up for them, right? They did do this. They did talk about this. And in the ACL hate speech on campus, and I got to be real quick as we close out here, but they basically say verbal purity is not social change. And they believe if we punish bigoted speech, we're only treating the symptom, whereas the problem is bigotry itself. That's what we got to attack, that's what we got to go after, and that's what we got to disseminate. And when we come back from this commercial break here, we're going to be talking a little bit about that, because we're going to be talking about the Chilcot Report, Black Lives Matter, and all of that. We'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics.
This is Ishmael Brown, the HNIC from the Angry Black Rant podcast, and you're listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics.
Hi, my name's Callie.
And I'm Ari.
If you're like most of us, you're very concerned about the gay agenda's plans for world domination.
Are you tired of seeing glitter all over every damn thing?
Do you hate rainbows as much as any other red-blooded American?
Then we have the answer for all your baseless fears and unjustified paranoia.
Presented exclusively on Secular Media Network, the Gaytheist Manifesto is your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement.
You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, and at gaytheistmanifesto.secularmediagroup.com.
If you're not ready to get in line for your mandatory gay marriage and you're terrified of short-haired women in pantsuits, come have a listen and get up to date on their plans. You'll be glad you did.
Like what you're hearing? Check out more Cellar Door Skeptics every week right here on Spreaker and iTunes. Make sure you come back and check out new episodes with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. And always, remember, prepare for the revolution.
This is Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
Now, back to the show.
And welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. Thank you so much for sticking around with us through all those segments. Yes, they're amazing. Thank you, Hannah. That is number... Oh, you weren't even keeping track throughout all the episodes. So we're going to close the show out tonight. We're going to close it out on a little bit more serious note.
It's going to be a big one. This is going to be a big topic. It's going to be wide.
And it is. And there's a lot that's going to go into this. And I kind of wanted to start off by having this startup dialogue. And we're going to play that clip, I guess. Thanks, Tony Blair.
You got to start the web pages before you start up the segment, just in case you have that horrible auto play. That should be illegal, by the way. If anybody puts a website together that has autoplay, you are garbage. I hate that.
Anyway, so as we start the segment off, I wanted to have a very serious conversation. In society, there's been some turmoil, some anger.
A little bit.
There's been some death. There's been a lot of back and forth. My Facebook feed is Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, argument. And all of this is feeding off of what happened a month and a half ago, with the clubs in Orlando. And all of this is feeding off even farther shootings. People are dying all over the place. But black people are dying more often than not. And we got to look at this. This is a serious detriment to our society. And as we sit here and we talk about it, I sometimes am at loss for words. At some point, I look at these situations and I feel extreme empathy to people of minority races, because what happens to them on a daily basis is different than what happens to me. And it saddens me and it angers me. And I want to scream, I want to shout, I want to jump on a pedestal, I want to throw things, I want to riot in the streets, because people are losing their lives because of shitty fucking decisions, because of snap decisions, because bigotry and bias and racism run rampant. Because if you look at our political system, we have a politician that openly says racist things, openly says them on TV, and he's not, and he's the front runner. And yet we're going to sit here and people are going to say, well, you shouldn't kill police officers. And I agree with that. We shouldn't do that. I agree.
Nobody's contending that. Nobody's saying that you should turn fire and, get retribution like that. Blood, an eye for an eye, blood for blood. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Like that, it doesn't work. It never works.
But the big problem here is that people are marginalizing African Americans inside of our society. That's what's happening. We're seeing this. We're seeing them marginalized. We're seeing them murdered on the thousands compared to white people. And we could go through statistics. I think we've done that before, and I'm not going to do that tonight. I'm not here to lay out these statistics, these specific anecdotes that say, hey, here you go. Look, oh, by the way, oh, you're wrong because of this. No, I'm saying is let's stop. Take a moment and put yourself in their shoes. Would you want your child to be shot just because he has a lifestyle that's different than yours? There was a adult male that was shot because he told them he had a gun. He didn't do anything suspicious.
He's a legal holder too.
He was a legal holder. And yet the NRA isn't going, hold on, that guy should have his concealed and carry. Where the fuck's the riots in the streets by the NRA?
Yeah.
By God, if I fucking take their goddamn guns rights away, they're going to riot the fucking streets. They're going to turn around and go to Congress and be like, here, how much more money can we give you to not pass better gun laws? But nobody's stopping here, and nobody's accepting it, and nobody's arguing for this gentleman's behalf. But that's the thing. If we don't stop and we don't look at this and we don't understand where we're at, where we're going, what we're going to do, what's happening is if we take a grander view of things, we can see how society is marginalizing this minority. We can see how society is marginalizing all these other minorities, and that's what's creating a larger problem. So we can all agree and we can all feel comfortable, right, that our society is going to get better, but if we don't actually do something to change, we're going to start pushing the fringe views into play here. And we have a friend, John Larios, who's a big socialist. He wants this socialist change. He wants to create a complete socialistic America, right? And I don't know whether I agree or disagree with him because we've never interviewed him because he hasn't come on our damn show yet.
He's currently homeless and he's trying to figure out a way to get to a good internet connection. So he just signed up for school or whatever. But as soon as he's ready, man, I'm going to drag his ass on this show.
But that's the thing here, Chris, and that's what we have to look at, is that at this point, no matter what laws we enact, it's not changing anything. And I want to use it, before we get into the BRICS and the London and the larger macro-evolutionary picture of things, and macroeconomic picture of things, if you want to call it that way, I want to allude to an example. And this is why All Lives Matter is stupid. And I'm sorry, and I know this is probably very offensive. If you're listening to this, go ahead, send me a fucking email, because right now, this shit pisses me off. And I'm going to speak out in any way, shape, or form I can. I'm going to go to the protests. I'm going to stand out there and say Black Lives Matter. Because it's like this. If you take a picture of your table, right? Let's say you got 4 kids, and you dole out food, and you forget let's just say you forget the middle child. We're going to call him, I don't know, Monty. We'll just call him Monty. And we don't feed Monty. And if he speaks up and says, hey, hold on. My food matters too. And you're like, no, everybody's food matters. But you didn't give him that food, and he's sitting there waiting, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, hold on, I'll give you the scraps left over. I'm sorry, here, let me give this to you. But it's never consistent. How is that fair? How is that safe? How is he marginalizing what you believe or what you feel? He's not doing that. He's not doing anything. He's just saying, hold on, look at me. My food matters too, but he's leaving the two off because he's being silenced. He's not being given life and liberty pursuit and equality the same way we are. So if you're going to deny one of the 4 kids at your table food and then claim all food matters and everybody gets an equal share, but not actually give everybody an equal share, that's where the downfall is. And that's what's leading us to this conversation here. And we didn't want to do a whole Black Lives Matter segment tonight because we think that that's tying into a larger segment. So the Chilcot Report on the Iraq War kind of talks about, what happened with Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, back in the day. The Prime Minister
it's weird to say that's back in the day.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? Back in the day for Britain, and how he kind of teamed up with Bush about the Iraq wars. And then that leads into the whole actual conversation. So I listened to a podcast called Dan Carlin, Common Sense. Awesome podcast. If you don't listen to it, go do it. He's an independent. He's a fringe view person, but he's very, very respectful to both sides for the most part. And he talks about what happens when you get fringe views, why fringe views come. And it's when we don't take care of the marginalized, when we don't take care of the downtrodden. And these articles that we're about to talk about from the New York Times about, the Chilcot Report on the Iraq War and how devastating it was for the United States and really now, honestly, more for England. We look at these things and we can say, this is what's creating a larger divide. This is what's creating people wanting to do radical things. This is what's creating us wanting to get up and go, yeah, we're going to riot right now because we don't have anything else to do. Because when you get the 2 main parties, in our country's sake, the 2 main parties, and they're ignoring these things, there's no wonder we're getting fringe views. There's no wonder people are saying, I'm not going to sponsor Hillary because she's almost like the Democrat or the Republican. And in the end, I would rather go with, Donald Trump because I would rather have, extreme change, even if it's a chaotic change. And I don't agree with that. I don't want Donald Trump. I don't agree in any way, shape, or form that that's going to be good for our society. But I do know that fringe views become more prominent and that people make rash decisions based on how much we push them to the limit.
Well, there's all kinds of things that justify a lot of those perspectives. One, like the Black Lives Matter situation, I think is a very good, very clear distinction of a domestic situation that is very similar to the global situation, just on the micro versus macro scale. Like the Black Lives Matter thing is a situation where we are really neglecting a very specific group of people in our
they're not
society.
Neglecting; they're killing them. They're just killing them in large portions.
Well, I mean, you have to. We are treating those people as less than the standard citizen. They are getting less equal treatment. They are not considered, equal by any means. And I mean, this attack, this destruction, whatever you want to lay it on, like this is a great example of the elite situation through globalization and the way that society has formed essentially since we've been able to communicate immediately throughout the world. And we're looking at the Brexit situation. We're looking at the Iraq War situation. The Black Lives Matter is a good example of a domestic situation that's similar to what happened globally. And so, like what we have with the Iraq War and everything with what the UK and Tony Blair basically said, you know what, Bush, you've got my support no matter what you do. He took connections and he took politics and he took whatever. If I can have a piece of the pie, if I can have a nice slice of the pie and some influence and whatever kind of spoils that you get, I'm game. And by rolling the dice, by throwing down, hit the chips for his country, he jumped in with Bush and Cheney and all of the guys that went in and essentially broke bread against the Saddam Hussein regime. And in the end, it was a massive mistake on false information. And the Chilcot Report immediately, like right now, is causing all kinds of trouble. And just following, the Brexit report, where there's a ton of people that are pissed off. As we were talking before the show, and over 1 million people in the UK got up and protested in the streets before Blair announced that they would completely support the United States in a full-on aggressive, that's the key word here, aggressive invasion of Iran or of Iraq. And so that is a situation that's kind of tied into this whole thing. And I mean, I've been calling for this for a long, long time. And when we established, that there were no weapons of mass destruction in the United States, and they were just like, yeah, that's just what we do. We imperialistic. We do whatever we can, and then that we don't hold ourselves accountable to the World Court. The UN sanctions don't mean anything. The UN Security Council, they said we were wrong on every front, but we're exempt. We're a rogue state. That's one of the things that you notice if you look into the United States, that they consider themselves a rogue state nowadays, or we do. The UK, hopefully, this Tony Blair situation will show some negative. He'll get punished for this. And that kind of thing is what we're trying to tie it in. It's like the Black Lives Matter thing is, it's a small domestic thing, but it's a problem that we have with the minority. And then worldwide, we have an elite group of people who are just doing whatever they want. And Tony Blair and everybody, this new Chilcot Report is an example of how they completely and utterly messed up.
Yeah. And the big thing here, right, when we look at the Chilcot Report, the big thing here is that he was advised against this, right? I'll be honest, it sounds really sketchy. Like he sent Bush a note, and Bush sent a note back, and I shouldn't be held to this. But what happened is he sent this note, and he basically said, okay, hey, I'm going to be with you no matter what. Even if I don't agree 100%, I'm going to be with you. And then right before we went to war with Iraq, all his advisors, his high-end advisors, were like, hey, don't do this. and guess what he did anyway? Don't. He just did it anyway.
Yeah.
Some of me says they're leaving, the European Union, and to me, it almost feels like a bad move on their behalf. It wasn't planned out. I understand why. I don't agree with it. I understand why they would want to move, why they would want to change. And when we look at this, though, when you hear this report comes out, it goes, oh, hold on a second. Maybe they want to leave because there's no way the UN's going to do anything to them for it. I mean, the UN's not doing anything about this report so far. Maybe they will, but they didn't do anything to the U.S. We just said that, right? They did nothing to the U.S., and the U.S. went and created huge international turmoil.
Well, they condemned us, basically, but the United States just simply says, whatever, we don't care. We don't care.
Yeah, if it would be like, Chris, if you told me I'm a shithead, but you came over every day and drank alcohol with me and hung out and partied with me, even if you left and said you're a shithead every time, how do you think that I'm going to take that? I'm probably just going to go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not going to change.
That's a side effect of being really the only superpower in the world right now. And so what I'm hoping is that Tony Blair will get some punishment. There'll be some kind of precedent set for what is essentially, a violation of the Geneva Conventions and all kinds of things that are really, really important as far as the UN Security Council is concerned, and all that stuff that the United States basically says, do as I say, not as I do, and I'm not applicable, and I don't have to put myself in your shoes. But the reason the Chilcot Report, the Iraq attack, the Iraq War, and all this stuff is really important when it comes to talking about Brexit and the I guess the minorities and people that don't have any money and people that are angry, and what they talked about, or what Dan talked about in his the Common Sense podcast, is that essentially this Iraq War is kind of like this kindling, this fire starter. Like when the UK threw their stuff into full blast and the US went full bore into it on false pretenses that everyone agrees are false. Like this isn't like, oh, well, we're not really sure. No, they did not have weapons of mass destruction. In 1982, Reagan removed Saddam Hussein from the terrorist watch list, from the terrorist harboring state list, so that they could send them all kinds of arms and military aid. And then, of course, Saddam invaded Kuwait and ruined everything, so we had to attack him and destroy everything for the Desert Storm, which lasted, hours. And then once that was cleared up, once we figured it out, then we became friends with Saddam again and gave him a whole bunch of money until 2003 when, globally we decided, hey, we're going to wreck your stuff and we're going to go in there. And then the UK, on false pretenses, agreed with it. And so they made mistakes. But what happened is we've got, from just Desert Storm and from Saddam Hussein's attacks on the Kurds, which is the whole pretense for the Kuwait stuff, is millions of refugees going into Syria and all the countries nearby. Well, we've got the Iraq War as well. Millions more of refugees, like 4.5 million refugees. What are we talking about in the United States right now? We don't want any refugees. What's Trump saying? He doesn't want any Muslim refugees in this country. Like there's all kinds of these rippling, the butterfly effect situation, and a lot of people in the UK who did not want the UK to be involved in this, this decision. They're saying that, Tony Blair screwed us over and started all of these refugee problems, started all of this Islamic uprising, the Sharia law, and all of that kind of stuff that people are really angry about, but including the people that are having problems making any money at all. People that are living in northern England are significantly less likely to live in London than immigrants who move into the area because, manufacturing and money and income has stagnated, if not plummeted, in the UK. Those people are pissed, and they're the ones who did the Donald Trump style Brexit exit that caused, they're just like, fuck you, because we've already got it going. Like that's the middle finger. That's the middle finger that these people gave to the EU. That was what their option was, and I fear, just like Dan Carlin said, that is going to be what happens in November when the United States, which has been living on an elite versus a poor minority for so long, that's what's going to happen. We're going to have a bunch of people that are just like, there's no way Donald Trump will ever win, so I'm going to vote for him as a middle finger to the establishment, whatever class that happens. The Hillary Clinton, if she wins, then the major opposition position for Donald Trump. Like the middle finger to Hillary Clinton and the billionaires, because, well, it's weird that Donald Trump is a billionaire, but I mean, I fear that kind of response that the UK has had, and this is all this buildup, like all of this stuff from turmoil in the United States, the Black Lives Matter stuff. I think it kind of ties into this economic problem, all these situations. Is one of the reasons why I support Bernie Sanders, and I'm wearing a Bernie shirt right now. But I mean, they also say that some of the supporters of the Bernie Sanders stuff, it's the same situation. We're tired of the establishment, and we want change. And by voting for him, we're giving the middle finger to the establishment. Really, that's the whole reason. Like all of these things all kind of tie in. It's like it's been building for a long time. And I don't know if it's going to come to a pass immediately, or if this is a couple of little bits that are just going to start showing, but it's going to get suppressed and it'll disappear and it'll go to the 2020 elections. But we'll see. I'm going to guess that this is going to be an interesting November.
Yeah, and that's the big thing here, right? What does Dan Carlin say? What does he say, Hannah? He talks about what happens when you take a minority and you suppress them for so long. So
it doesn't even have to be minority; just be one, like the poor people, which is a conglomeration of all the minorities. It could be all the poor white people, all the poor black people, all the poor Latin American people. After not paying attention to their needs for so long, the people that are to-do, the elite 1%, the people who have everything, after not paying attention for so long, they get pissed.
Yeah. And see, and that's the big thing here. That's the thing we got to look at. That's the thing we got to concentrate on. That's the thing we want to understand, if you want to call it that, right? Is we have to look at and we have to go, okay, what's going to happen here? What's going to happen when we fail, or when we don't fail, or when we get rid of the marginalized sex? Well, what happens if they're 1%? It's not going to do anything, right? They can't rise up. They can't kill anything. They can't touch anything. They can't do anything. They can't participate, per se. And I don't agree with that, but they can't. And what happens when they get stronger, when they get louder, when they grow in numbers?
When the pendulum swings further and further
When the pendulum
every time.
swings further, exactly. What happens when that happens? Well, when that happens, Chris, when that happens and that goes out on the limb and that changes how life is, that's when you see the fringe becoming more popular. That's when you see Europe going, wait, Britain, come back. They're leaving. They're gone. They're fleeting. It's over. And we'll see. Maybe they'll have a new, regime. Maybe somebody else will do something in the next coming months. Maybe they'll talk about it. They'll be like, hey, come back. Please help us. Come back. Maybe they'll do that. But we don't know that. We don't know because we haven't seen in the future, because we're not soothsayers. But we do know that when we marginalize minorities, when we marginalize groups, at some point, if their numbers grow, it's going to create a fringe, it's going to create change, and evolution is going to continue to happen, because that's what we know, that's what we see, that's what we believe in. So as we close the show out tonight, I would encourage you to do a couple of things. I would encourage you to go out and do your research. Do your research. Explain why you want it to be an All Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter versus a Black Lives Matter. Because I stand on it. I'm Black Lives Matter, flat out, period. Defriend the show. Don't care. Right?
Yeah, pretty much.
But as we leave the episode, as we leave all of this behind us, as we transcend into the future, Hannah.
The future.
Remember, we're here to help you, help us, help society prepare for the revolution. Follow us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, follow us on iTunes, and everyone have a good night.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.